There's a section in the Torah that's a bit cryptic. All these years, I always had a hard time with this section in the Torah. And this is a section about the Nazir. Anyone here heard of the Nazir? The Nazir seems to be very irrelevant. It's hard to understand, as you'll see I'll ask. And I want to spend a few minutes discussing tonight what is the practical lesson we could draw out from this section of the Nazir in the Torah, and what is its purpose. The Torah writes that God spoke to Moshe and he said, Ish o isha ki aflilindo neder. A man or woman who takes upon themselves a neder. We know usually we're supposed to stay far away from neder. We've been told that since we were little. Always say bli neder when you want to do something. Nedarim, taking vows, are pretty serious. However, this individual felt that he needed to make a neder. She needed to make a neder. Nazir lahazir laHashem, to become a Nazir to God. Now, what exactly is a Nazir? So Torah doesn't say what a Nazir is, but it tells us what a Nazir can't do. There are three areas that a Nazir is prohibited in being involved in. First, the Torah writes, this is the first one, Miyayin v'shechar yazir. From wine and anything that's connected to the grapes, he has to abstain from. Lo yishte, even grapes that have been sitting in water, raisins, anything that's connected to grapes, he can't have. Kol yemen izro, mikol asher yasim megefen, anything comes from a vine, he can't eat. That's prohibition number one. Prohibition number two, Kol yemen neder nizro tar lo yaval rosho. All the days of his neder, of being a Nazir, he cannot cut his hair. Now, how long is a Nazir for? Anyone here know? It's for 30, very good, very good. 30 days. A Nazir is for 30 days. That means for 30 days, he cannot cut his hair and shave. So, that's prohibition number two. Prohibition number three is Kol yimei aziro laHashem al nefesh mit lo yavo. It says that he cannot become tameh to a dead body. We know normally a person who goes to a cemetery, he attracts a certain contamination, tuma, impurity. And this person is on a high level, he's holy, so he cannot enter into a cemetery. To what extent can he not become tameh with a dead body? La'aviv u'limo, even for his mother, his father, achi v'achoto, his brother, his sister, all the 7 relatives, he cannot become tameh. Now, what normally is the halacha? Can a kohen who has a friend, a close friend that he's known for 20 years, all of a sudden tragically passes away, is a kohen allowed to go to the funeral? No. Kohen has a certain high standard of kedusha. He cannot go to the funeral. What if it's the kohen's lo aleinu sister, or mother, or father? Can he go to the cemetery?
Yes.
Good, very good. He's allowed to go. I remember, probably it was nine years ago, when Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal, his wife passed away 2-3 years before he passed away. And they drove him to the cemetery. He gave one of the most moving and saddest eulogies I've ever heard about his relationship with his wife. And the fact that they were one unit, everything they did together. He came to the cemetery, but he couldn't come out of the car. Although he's allowed to come to the actual burial plot, he couldn't get himself to come. It was too painful. And he stayed in the car. But a Kohen is allowed to go to the cemetery for 7 relatives. However, what about a Kohen Gadol? We don't have Kohen Gadols these days because we don't have a Beit HaMikdash. Is a Kohen Gadol allowed to go to a cemetery for a loss of one of the close relatives, his own wife? Is he allowed to go to the cemetery? No. So Kohen Gadol, the high Kohen, he's above a regular Kohen. He has a higher level of holiness, and he cannot go to the cemetery at all for any reason, for anybody. This Nazir has the status of a Kohen Gadol. He's not allowed to go into a cemetery for any reason whatsoever. By the way, on a side note, it's not a good idea for people to go to a cemetery too often. I don't think anybody here does, but especially women more than men. Don't ask me why. There's certain forces of impurities that latch onto a person, and that person should not go too often unless they have to go. You know, someone very holy passed away, a relative, you go to the cemetery, you don't hold back. But generally, there's the highest level of impurity is in a cemetery. Wherever there was the greatest kedusha, greatest holiness, that's where there's the greatest impurity. A human being, a Jew, is the ultimate kedusha, ultimate holiness in life. So when a Jew passes away, the kedusha leaves, the neshama leaves. In place of it comes impurity. That's the highest level of impurity. The more kedusha, more holiness, the more impurity when the kedusha leaves. The goyim, the non-Jews, do not transmit the same level of impurity as Jews do. That's a whole other discussion. Now, so these are the three prohibitions. A guy, he makes a vow to be a Nazir. He cannot cut his hair. He cannot drink anything that's related to grape juice or wine, grapes. And last but not least, he cannot go walk into a cemetery. Very holy level. Now, what exactly is an example of a Nazir? What is a Nazir? The Midrash, there's a really Gemara and Nedarim, an example is given of someone who became Nazir in history. Says the Gemara that Amar Rabbi Shimon HaTzadik says, one time a person came from the south and I saw this individual. He was a very good looking guy. You're talking about a guy who was abnormally good looking. He had a beautiful eyes. He was beautiful appearance. Someone off the charts. And amarti lo, and I saw that over his month or two stay, he let his hair grow long. And the procedure is after 30 days, a Nazir shaves his head. Shaves his head. So amarti lo, I went over to him and I said, Beni. He says, my son, what exactly was the purpose of you coming and ruining your looks? Such a good-looking, handsome guy. What gives? Why did you shave your head? He says, listen, ro'eh ha'iti, I was a shepherd. And one time I was going up in the mountains and I reached a well of water, a spring of water. I guess this guy didn't have a mirror at home. He never saw his own reflection, his own image. I saw my reflection in this spring of water. Immediately, the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, took hold of me. He realized how good looking he was. And he sought to remove me from this world. To go after sin. A person who is very good looking has a big challenge in life. Whether it's a guy, whether it's a girl. People that are very, very abnormally good looking has big tests. Whether test in arrogance, it gets to their heads, them running after sin. And the Gemara discusses this at length, the challenge of being abnormally good looking. It's not such a simple thing, simple test to pass in life. Amarti lo, and I told them, and I told myself, this is what he told himself when he looked at his image in the water. Rasha, he says, you evil person that you want to run after sin. He was really enticed to run after sin. Lama mitka be'olam shena shelcha, why are you becoming arrogant and conceited of a world that's not yours? Someone who in the future is going to become worm food, is going to be buried in the ground, and he's going to be eaten up by the worms and maggots. He says, I swear that I'm going to shave my head, I'm going to vow to become a Nazir. And immediately he says to Shimon HaTzadik, I stood up and I kissed him on his head, and I said there should be more Nazirs like you in the world. That is a valid vow, that is a good reason to make a vow. So this is an example where the Gemara is telling us that the reason why this person made this vow to become a Nazir is to separate himself from sinning. And in all three areas, whether a person, his looks is enticing him to sin, or whether a person through alcohol, through through wine. A person becomes intoxicated. You do a lot of things. You're loose. And you do a lot of things that normally wouldn't do. And you say a lot of things you wouldn't say. So this person decided to abstain from wine, to let his hair grow long, become a Nazir, and not to become tameh by going into the cemetery, and he has a very high level. How high is his level? If you look what the Torah writes, he says he's considered Kadosh LaHashem, the Pasuk writes. He's holy unto God. Nezer Elokav al Rosho, the crown of God is on his head. He reaches a level of even a Kohen Gadol. The same way Kohen Gadol cannot walk into a cemetery, and he cannot become tameh even for the close relatives, so to this guy. And he reaches the level of a prophet even. Level of a prophet. Misilat Yesharim, the path of the just, lists 11 steps in reaching the level of becoming a prophet and getting prophecy. It's not a simple task. The question that begs to be asked here, and this has been troubling me for many years, is what in the world is the big deal about what this Nazir did? You think about it, the fact that he's praised, God's glory is on him, he has the Shekhinah resting on him, he deserves the crown of God, and he's the level of a prophet and a Kohen Gadol. What did he do already? Rab Leib Chasman Zatzal asks, what in the world is the big deal about what he did? A guy, he made a neder to become Nazir, so he can't cut his hair, 30 days, big whoop. Don't we all, at least, the people who try, they don't have to shave. During Sfirat Omer, we leave our beards for 33 days. We don't get haircuts for 33 days. We don't say, wow, look at this guy. He didn't take a haircut for 33 days. Stick the blue ribbon on his chest. Look what he did. What an accomplishment. The guy, he doesn't walk into a cemetery. How often do we walk into a cemetery? What's the big deal? 30 days he doesn't go into a cemetery. The guy, he doesn't drink wine. No grape juice. Okay, so you deal without it. You hear Kiddush on Shabbat from someone else. What in the world is the significance of a Nazir? This should be bothering everybody. When you read this parsha, I've read it for so many years. First of all, it seems totally irrelevant. Now that we don't have a Beit HaMikdash, it's totally irrelevant to us. And second of all, it doesn't even make sense. What did he do? What was the great accomplishment that he's looked on this as someone on such a high level, on this pedestal? Look at him. He's holy. He's on the level of a Kohen Gadol. He's a prophet. What did he do already? He didn't do anything. Valid question? What makes the question even stronger is that if you look at the sources, they write that this holiness that he gets and God's glory, it takes effect right away. He gets the status. Once he makes the neder, boom! The neder causes this kiddush, to this holiness, to take effect on him. And the question that begs to be asked is, what did he do? You tell me, even if you tell me at 30 days it was a big deal, it was a big challenge, so then the kedusha comes on him. We're saying no. The holiness rests on the guy immediately, on the spot when he makes this neder. And I ask you, what is the big deal about becoming a Nazir? I want to spend a few minutes to try to address this and see that if you could pull out an application to our lives. There's one commentary, is the Even Ezra. And the Even Ezra says a fascinating explanation behind the value of becoming a Nazir. And this is very relevant to everybody sitting here. Even Ezra writes that what is the great value, this is what the Torah refers to as a pele, that he did something wondrous. He says, Ki rov ha'olam holchim achar ta'avata. He says because the whole world is chasing after their taiva, after the desire. And he explains. He says each one of these three things, these three prohibitions, are alluding and referring to a different area. When the Torah writes that he can't drink wine, you know what wine represents? Wine symbolizes and represents the pleasures of this world. If you have an individual, you see that the whole world is sucked in by the physical pleasures. They're pursuing the physical pleasures. From today till tomorrow, they're living their whole life in business in whatever area to amass more wealth and be indulging in the physical pleasures. That's what America is all about. That's what every billboard, every commercial, you need this vacation, you need this car, you need this house, you need this food, and then you got it all. This person sees that the whole world is going this way. And he decides, wait a minute, I'm going to go against the tide. I'm going to go against the current. That's someone who's abnormal. That's someone who's wondrous. There are very few people in the world that are not just brainlessly following the flow of society. Whatever society preaches, that's what I'll do. Your wine represents the physical pleasures. Not becoming tameh in a cemetery is referring to the impurities in the world. There's no lack of impurity in this world, as you will see. Unfortunately, from all the statistics that I'll quote in a few minutes, the impurities of the world. Cutting his hair, what is cutting hair referring to? Is a person's looks. How much money is invested in this society on the value on a person's looks. And a person will follow whatever Madison Avenue presents to us as this is what's in style. It's very hard for a person not to follow that. This is what's in. What's in today is out tomorrow. Follow the styles. Now sometimes in life, the styles and what's in is contrary to a Jewish person's beliefs and what we hold in halacha. It is very, very difficult to go against the flow of society. You have an entire society, all the women and all the billboards are dressed a certain way. You want to look good, you have to show your body. You want to be someone who's beautiful, you have to show your skin. Things that are completely contrary to the Torah's beliefs. Who is considered a Nazir? Someone who's holy, someone who has the crown of God on their head. Someone who says, wow, I'm taking a step back. I'm not just going to follow society. I'm going to go against society. It's a difficult thing to do. When you see that the trends and what's in, especially if guys can't relate to women, a woman have the desire to show off their bodies and want to wear a skirt. I talked to many girls I've seen that the skirt, even the dates I went on, girls wearing skirts that halachically you're supposed to cover your knees. They wear it just by the knee line or a little bit above. And on the date, the whole time they're trying to pull down the skirt so their knees are not showing too much when they're on the date. So there's certain guidelines that the Torah sets that's completely contrary to what society preaches. Says the Ibn Ezra that if a person has this wherewithal to make a decision that I'm going against society, society preaches one way, I'm going to go against society. Says the Ibn Ezra, that's a person who's considered a Nazir. He's deserving of such praise, of glory, and a tremendous honor. You look around the world and society, you have a whole world that is involved in stealing. I don't mean stealing, outright stealing, and going and robbing a bank. I mean the rationalizations. And in business, if a little signature here, a little lie here, we're living in a society that the emet, the truth, is very far from people. People are not truthful. But Shiva said one of the biggest downfalls of this society is the fact that there's no honesty anymore. There's no honesty among relationships. There's no honesty between a husband and wife. People are cheating on each other. There's no honesty. And there's no honesty with oneself. A person thinking about life and analyzing life and thinking, well, honestly, is what I'm doing the proper thing to be done? Am I being honest with myself, or am I rationalizing my way into sin, my way into the business? I had someone was just telling me, I don't know if I should even say this, that from religious Jew, you talk about cheating in business, this guy makes a lot of money, and it pains him and hurts him to give a couple $100,000 of taxes each day. So he approached certain Rosh Hashiva, a certain rabbi that I'm close with. He told him, listen, you're running an organization, you have a school, I'll donate, quote unquote, several $100,000 to you. All you have to do, you take half of it and you give me back half. And no one will have to know. Why should we give $300,000 to taxes and the money goes to who knows who? Let me give it to a good cause, give it to tzedakah, give it to a yeshiva, and this way you'll gain. You'll write me a check back for half the money, and Shalom Yisrael, everything will be good. They won't know. On the taxes it will say that he gave $300,000 to this organization. It's completely illegal. Such money, of course the rabbi I know is very, very honest, such money God does not want. There's certain things that are done in society, and even religious people, and they rationalize that I'll give the money to tzedakah. God writes many times over, God doesn't want that money. Don't give that money to tzedakah. Don't do what's wrong, do what's right, and you won't have the money. So fine, you'll give less tzedakah. What do you mean? There's less tzedakah being given to the shul. Less tzedakah being given to the yeshivas. You know how many organizations I could support? To that we say, God doesn't want that money. That money is impure money. You know how many times halacha writes that if money comes to a person through improper means, that money has no bracha. Many times it's stated. It's stated by Tisha B'Av, for example. Tisha B'Av, really a person shouldn't work. Says the halacha, if you work, there's no rosh simon bracha, there won't be a sign of bracha. You'll lose that money somehow. That money is going to leave you somehow. Similarly, I would say in business, if a person is getting his money through the wrong means, whether it's lying, whether it's cheating, rationalizations, that money has no blessing on it. And God says, I don't want that money. Don't give me that money. Don't bring it to Beit HaMikdash. Don't bring it to the shuls. Don't give it to yeshiva. I don't want that money. And this, you have to realize that it's a whole society going one way. If a person can accept upon themselves, I'm not going to follow the ways of society. I'm going to be different. That already is a person who's very, very special. Give you some other examples. You have a whole world that is not careful with Lashon Hara. Whole world is not careful with what comes out of their mouth. It's totally belittled, and people will give you all the reasons and rationalizations in the world why it's okay for them to have the conversations they're having. A lot of times you hear from people, a Persian woman, I clearly remember, she told me, I was telling her the importance of, she was having issues in life, a lot of struggles. I told her to accept upon yourself not to speak Lashon Hara, to learn 2 halachas a day. It's a big segula. To learn 2 halachas of Chavetz Chaim of Lashon Hara a day. So, there's an older Persian woman, she said, Rabbi, I say it in Farsi, which means, so what should we do? Should we become mute, like we shouldn't talk? Every rabbis have halachas about everything. You tell us we can't say this, we can't say that. We're going to have to sit at home and not have any conversation. I said, no. Chavetz Chaim, by the way, went out of his way, and people knew him as someone who was very talkative. He was a big schmoozer, the Chavetz Chaim. And he went out of his way to schmooze a lot, to show people that he could schmooze, and yet still not speak Lashon Hara. And this is what he quotes, this is the Vilna Gaon. This is the Vilna Gaon writes, you want to know what the point of life is? I'll quote you 2 sources that is exactly hitting this point of going against the flow of society, going against the flow of the world. Everybody's going this way, and one person out there decides that, no, I'm going to go the other way. Says the Vilna Gaon, ad your motto, to the end of a person's life, you have to know who the Vilna Gaon is. Everyone here knows who the Vilna Gaon was? Vilna Gaon lived about 300 years ago. He reached the level of a Rishon, which means the level of a rabbi from 1,000 years ago. He used to sleep 4 half-hour increments at night. He mastered the entire Torah at a very young age. His whole life was complete holiness and attachment to God. He writes, the entire purpose of a person in life is not to torture himself through fasting and other forms of torture. You find in the old books written that for certain sins a person has to accept upon themselves fasting or some other forms of torture. He says that's not what it's all about. What is the proper teshuvah of repentance and a perspective of life? He says, Rak beresen pi v'tavoto. Controlling your mouth, specifically the words that come out of your mouth. Vilna Gaon writes that the ultimate judgment on the day of judgment is the strict, they scrutinize every word that you said in your life, whether it was proper or not. That's what he writes. What comes out of your mouth? L'tavoto, and a person's desires, person's passions, person's lust. You desire to do something, you want something, and you control yourself. You have a tendency to get angry. It's an emotional reaction, and you get angry. You're able to control that emotion, and you don't get angry. Says the Vilna Gaon, that is the entire purpose of life. Zehu kol pri ha'olam haba. He says that his entire olam haba is that. V'zo yoter mikol hatanyot. And he says this is greater than all the fasts and any other affliction that you want to bring upon yourself. You can't imagine the reward of someone who's able to control themselves at a time of passion, at a time of lust. V'chol rega v'rega. The example he gives is by speaking Lashon Hara. He focuses on this a lot. every moment that a person closes his mouth and not saying, you have a conversation at the table. Friday night, everyone's gathered, and you have a nice conversation. And someone brings up so-and-so, and you know there's going to lead to Lashon Hara. And you have something juicy to say, something very funny to say. Says the Vilna Gaon, you control yourself at that moment. You don't talk, you hold back. He says a person has no clue what reward is awaiting for them just for one time. Bishvil, one time he held his mouth and he did not say those words of slander. La'or haganuz, to that hidden light that no angel can even fathom what that reward is in the next world. For being able to control yourself for one moment. And he says through this, through the controlling of one's mouth and one's desires, you're forgiven for all your sins, and a person is saved from the worst of punishments in the next world. That is, he says, that is entire Olam Haba. And similarly, the other sources also say this. Mesilat Yesharim I quoted. I'll quote you one line, and then I'll get to the stats which I wanted to discuss. The Mesilat Yesharim brings down, when he's discussing the purpose of life here, in the introduction, is one of the most famous fundamental chapters in any book written. In the introduction, he brings down that a person has to realize that the purpose of life is not for this world. This life is so short. This life is so temporal. Time flies by. No human being can possibly believe that the purpose of life is here. And clearly it's for the next world. How does a person gain the highest level of Olam Haba? He sums it up with one line. Ukvi hashira shekavash vitzro. According to the amount that a person controlled their yetzer hara, controlled their passions and the desires, v'tavotav, and their lust, v'nidrachik min hamarchikim minatov, and he distances himself from that which takes you away from God, ken yasigo v'ismachbo. To that extent, to the extent that you're able to fight off the yetzer hara, fight off your desires, is what your olam haba in the next world. And this, says the commentators, they say that this is what the Nazir is all about. The Nazir takes upon himself, it's not these three provisions per se, is what they represent. Whole world is going one way, I'm going to go the other way. Whole world lies, they cheat, they do things wrong, they follow their passions and desires, I'm going to go the other way. Very few people I've met in life that are able to do that and go against the flow of society. It's very, very difficult, very, very hard. Now, I'll jump, since we're low on time. Here's a section where I was going back and forth if I should discuss this tonight. But I feel that the way this generation is holding and where society is holding, I have no choice. So normally I would not say this with ladies around, but I feel that it's befitting and proper for ladies to know from now, because soon I think all of you, B'ezrat Hashem, are going to get married, and you're going to be raising children, and you're going to have a husband, and you're going to have boys in the house. And I need to discuss this now to, I hope, to get across this message, because so many mothers, I don't know where they are. They're out to lunch. I've talked to them so many times about their kids and about the problems that people are having in society, and they are so naive. They have no clue of what's going on in life. I'll start off with another point from this parsha, which is connected to this Nazir. The first Rashi, you know, there's a connection between the parsha of Sota and Nazir. Everyone here knows what the Sota is? Sota is a woman who basically, her husband warns her, she's hanging out with some man. Husband says, don't go near her. And she doesn't listen. And he suspects that she may have cheated on him. There's a whole long section in the Torah exactly what happens with this woman. I'm not going into that. Rashi is bothered by the obvious question. What is the connection between the Sota and the Nazir? These two sections in the Torah are placed one after the other. First discusses this woman, this wayward, rebellious wife, who potentially went and cheated on her husband. To the Nazir, what's the connection? Listen to this. He says, Lomar lecha, this is to teach you. Shekol haro sota bikikula, whoever sees the sota in her degraded state, when she's brought in front of the Kohen Gadol, and they do the whole procedure, and if she had cheated on her husband by drinking the waters, she dies a horrible death in front of everyone. Whoever sees this whole procedure, Yazir atzma min hayayin, he should abstain, he should remove himself from wine, which brings to sin. Apparently, there's a lesson that we're all supposed to take from this sota, that whoever sees the sota should make a neder, should make some type of separation from the area that they feel that they're weakened. Is this relevant at all to us, this sota business? So I want to mention that it is a bit relevant, unfortunately. What is this sota these days? Whoever sees the sota should separate, and in their degradation, should remove himself from wine. What is this referring to these days? So I'll just share with you some facts from life and what's going on in society. I know I do that a lot, but I think it's very important for people to be aware of what's going on around us. And maybe we could then make the application. What does it mean that your sota, we should look at the sota. What is the sota in society these days? There's a book written by Stephen Covey. You may have heard of him, very famous book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the parts in his book, he brings down something mind-boggling. He says, a quote, "How could this happen? How could it be that we live in a society where technology makes it possible for children who have no wisdom or experience or judgment on these matters to become victims of such sick, deeply addictive mental poisoning as pornography? Over the past 30 years, the situation for families has changed powerfully and dramatically. Consider the following." Listen to what he writes in the past 30 years of what a transformation America and the world has gone through. Illegitimate birth rates have increased more than 400% in 30 years. The percentages of families headed by single parent has more than tripled. The divorce rates has more than doubled. Many project that about half of all new marriages will end in divorce. In LA, the rates are higher. It's somewhere between 60 to 70% in LA. This is what we're talking about. You could, your typical person getting married, especially if they're not religious and they're not following the guidelines in the Torah, chances of divorce are much higher. I'm not saying that if a person is religious, they're not going to get divorced. There are plenty of people who have a lot of issues in life and they can't control their emotions and their traits. And a person who's angry and all the other bad traits, of course, you're going to end up in a divorce. It has nothing to do with that. But if you follow religion, you follow the Torah's guidelines of what it means to be a religious Jew, your chances are your marriage succeeding are much higher. I always love to say the divorce rate in the world, in America and in the world, is somewhere in the 60th percentile. In yeshiva, 15 years of yeshiva, I saw hundreds and thousands of people go through yeshiva. Baruch Hashem, we have a very big yeshiva. There's 600, 700 people, and each year more people come in, more people go out. And I witnessed in all the years of the yeshiva 2 divorces. It's less than 1%, way less than 1%. And those are because of technicalities. Someone had certain information that they didn't tell them, and after they got married, right away they found out, and they got divorced right away. What is the difference between the people in yeshiva that have less than 1% divorce rate to the people of society? It's very simple. It's in yeshiva, you're focused on working on yourself. You're taught all the rules and laws of God. You have to be selfless in life. Life is not all about you. Life is about giving. All the important traits in life, to be humble, to not criticize, to all the basics of life that you need to function and to be happy in life is what they preach in yeshiva. Parents are so nervous about their kids going to yeshiva, what's going to happen to them, they're not going to come back to my house and eat my food. Some of the concerns are concerns, but you know what yeshiva does to a person? It awakens them to the reality of life. You're able to see straight. You're able to focus on what really matters. What really matters is not driving that fancy car or having lots of money, and so many people not getting married in the non-religious world, because you don't know how many guys that I talk to, non-religious world, they say we can't get married because the girls have this expectation. They want a guy who's driving this type of car, and they have expectations in life, and it becomes so hard to get married. That's what really matters in life. That's what's going to make a happy marriage. Your standards and life expectations. People are so off, it's unreal. They have no clue what really matters. What does Torah do? What does the yeshiva do? It allows you to focus on what really matters in life. It allows you to be happy in life. I'm telling you, it's a different world. And this is what we're talking about. Teenage suicide has increased almost 300%. Scholastic aptitude test scores among all students have dropped 73 points. Number one health problem for American women today is domestic violence. 4 million women are beaten each year by their partners. You watch, not the WWF, what's the other one where they're allowed to beat the living daylights out of each other? What is it? Inside they're inside without even the gloves. I forgot what it's called. No one here knows? Yeah, they're allowed to beat each other, even they're bleeding away. People are watching all these action movies and all these horrible things, and you wonder, why is the domestic violence on the rise? You notice that the movies these days are very, very different than 30 years ago. I guarantee you will not be able to watch a movie from 30, 40 years ago. You'll be so bored to death because just the pictures on the screen take so long for it to move. These days, many studies have been done. It's just quickly. One screen can, 2 seconds, move on to the next screen, boom, boom. So much action going on, things exploding. There's like so much for your brain, you can't even handle it. People wonder why I have children develop ADD and all these other disorders. So much flying, how much can you handle in 2 seconds of... So 4 million women beaten each year. 1/4 of all adolescents contract a sexually transmitted disease before they graduate from high school. There's 25%. Is this a normal society? I dare to say not. Look at this. He compares the top disciplinary problems according to public school teachers. Look at this list. From 1940 to compared to 1990. Keep in mind this is 26 years ago. And how much we've deteriorated since 26 years ago. But listen to this. In 1940, this was the main problems in the public schools. Talking out of turn. That was a big deal. Chewing gum. Kids have the audacity to chew gum in class. Chutzpah. Making noise, running in the halls, cutting in line, dress code infractions. I really am curious what the dress code infractions were. And littering, not making in the basket. Now, you fast forward 50 years to 1990. You have drug abuse, alcohol abuse, teen pregnancies, suicide rates, rape, robbery, assault, immorality. Can you imagine what happened in 50 years? It's incredible what a transformation this country has gone through. And a lot of it has to do with the media, with the internet and TV and what's being preached. I said this before, you heard this from me. If you compare the shows from 30, 40 years ago to now, forget 30, 40 years ago, my time. It wasn't so long ago where I was young, believe it or not. And, the shows back in my days were all like Full House. Everything was centered around the family. It was Family Ties. It was Family Matters. Not Family Ties, Family Matters. It was Simpsons. Is that show still around? Yeah. Think about the shows, everything was around the family, centered around the family life. You fast forward to now, I don't watch TV, but some of the guys tell me that the shows are all about the single Manhattan type of lifestyle, where the guy's going out and hanging out and having a good time and sleeping around. And the very few family shows that there are, you have, what is it called, the Modern Family, but having two fathers, that's the husband, that's the family shows these days. Do you know what kind of influence that has on people? And on top of that, you have the internet. I'm saying this, again, normally I would not say this. I'm saying this for women, for girls to be aware that when you have your kids and you have a husband, the internet is causing a complete destruction in people's lives. Forget the religious angle. I'm not even talking about God, no God in the picture. I'm talking about people being functioning human beings, about people's brain chemistries not being completely destroyed through the internet. This is a quote from one of the biggest rabbis in New York City about the problems that the internet is causing in families. I'll quote to you what he says. Not a week goes by that I don't have to deal with a shalom bayit problem, family harmony, husband and wife, or problem in chinuch habanim, raising children, boys or girls, who all went to very fine schools, or at least what is left of a very fine boy or girl, calls me up crying, begging for help. There's nobody that could claim that either they're not affected, or a family member, or a neighbor, or a friend sitting next to him in shul, or the chavruta sitting across from him in yeshiva. If you discounted it until now, you're going to have to take my word for it when I say that there's no single problem facing Klal Yisrael, facing the Jews and communities at large. There's no bigger problem than this. He's talking about the addictions and the problems that people face with the internet. There's a chov kadosh. It says there's a holy obligation to do something before there is no semblance of kedusha, of holiness left among the Jews. And I don't say that lightly. Keep in mind the people who come to me are so frum, so religious, and so upset about what's going on that they're willing to talk to the rabbi. It takes a certain guts to talk to the rabbi, to open up to the rabbi. That means that there are thousands of people who would never even dare to speak to the rabbi. I hate to sound pessimistic, but if you have unrestricted internet in the house, internet that is not both filtered and reported, I would say there's a higher than 90% chance that people have already stumbled in your house, been nichshul, and if it hasn't happened yet, there's more than 90% chance that it will happen. If it's not happening at home, it's happening in the office. He says that there's so many problems that people are dealing with. You don't know how many kids in high school that I dealt with both in New York and here, that the parents are totally out to lunch. They have no clue. Miss, does your son, who's 14 years old, have internet access at home? Yeah. Does he have a smartphone? Yeah. Did you block the internet sites? Did you have a strong filter on it? No. Why wouldn't you put a filter on? My son, he's a good boy, Rabbi. He's a good kid. He's not going to do anything wrong. For girls also it's a big problem. Many other issues that we discussed in the past, with the social media and getting involved, with all other, many other things. And you don't know how many amount of addictions that are involved with the internet and with the smartphones. This is a quote from Dr. Twersky, Abraham J. Twersky, rabbi, doctor. Again, this is a man in his 80s, and he's dealt in his psychology work with over 40,000 patients. You have no idea as to what category of people have fallen victim to internet addiction, all sorts of addictions. We would not think that these type of people would be capable of it. Hopefully nobody who is a Yer Shamayim, who's God-fearing, is going to look for that kind of trash and that kind of filth. However, it's perfectly possible that while monkeying around on the internet, you hit a button and there's a pop-up of something inappropriate. You weren't looking for it, but it happened. You have exactly 3/10 of a second. 3/10 of a second to turn it off. And if you avoid it for the 4/10 of a second, you may become addicted. Again, this is a psychologist of the top caliber telling you that the potential harm behind the internet. This is how severe it is. It's one of the most powerful addictions, he writes. Day after day, I get letters and calls where people will say, what can I do to save myself? People are trapped. They're slaves. They have no free will anymore. Person who thinks, we discussed this also, that if I could do whatever I want, if the people that are really chained down and in prison are the religious people. God tells them everything, they have no freedom. The Shabbat, they don't have freedom. They don't have freedom what they look at, what they say, what they eat. No freedom whatsoever. You see a society of people who are free, and what happens to someone who has freedom? It's a life of destruction, and they're really not free. The Pirkei Avot writes, who's truly free is someone who's you're able to do what you want to do. Someone who's addicted, someone who's running after the passions and the lusts and what the society has to offer, they're not free. You're complete person is completely chained down. You're imprisoned. And there are many people like that I've met. I had a kid, I wouldn't normally say this, in the high school, in 10th grade. He told me, I was very close with him, he told me he has open internet. I said, are you crazy? You don't have a filter, you should have some type of system where someone could, there's a good app, it's called Accountable to You. It's unbelievable. Where Accountable to You is that you have someone else able to see whatever website you go on. I have set up, my Rosh Yeshiva, as all the rabbis say, no matter who you are, doesn't matter how holy you are, what kind of rabbi you are, what level you're holding by, you have to set up your boundaries, you have to set up the safeguards. And they said there's an obligation upon everyone to have this app, it's called Accountable to You. Any place that you go on, you have an email is sent, it will show where exactly you went to. This will save a person. A person will say, is there God in the world? Yeah, there's God in the world. But Rav Yochanan ben Zakkai, on his deathbed, one of the biggest rabbis, they came to him and they asked him for last departing words. He said, I wish I give you bracha that the fear of God should be the same way that you fear people. They said, Rabbeinu Ad Kan, that's it? You should only fear God to the extent that you fear people? He says, you wish you were like that. People will say, if they do something wrong, as long as my friend doesn't see, as long as my father, as long as my rabbi doesn't see, if they would see, it was so embarrassing. But God's there. God's in your room, God's in your bedroom, God's in the bathroom, God's everywhere. And a person is not so hesitant to sin. It's already outside. It's hard to feel that God is there watching you. But when there's someone else there, you know that they're watching you, that already is a preventative. And highly advised that everybody should have this. That you have someone, it's like someone who's there, that is, you're going to think twice before you click on any site. And this is something that we have to realize it's a big problem. So the reason I'm telling you this to the girls is that when you have your kids and your husband, even if a husband has open internet, I'm sorry, you should tell them that there should be a proper filter on here. You should have some form of filter, some form of protection where there's going to be an outside party. I have it. I have both a filter and this Accountable to You. What do you mean, Rabbi? A typical person will say, "You rabbis, you're a bunch of perverts. People are messed up." The Torah says the other way. It says, "Whoever sees a sota b'kilkula," you see a sota in a degraded state that's messing up, take upon yourself a vow, not a real vow, but say, "I'm going to be different. I'm not going to follow the whole society." To be open-minded. The rabbis back then, when the internet came out, you had rabbis that were screaming out, "Wow, what's going to happen to Klal Yisrael?" No one listened to them. They said, "Rabbis, they're crazy. They're out of their minds. What's the big deal?" And you fast forward 10, 15 years, and you see how many lives it's ruining. I can't tell you. My rabbis tell me, and my rabbi is really involved. He's in his close to 60. He deals with shalom bayit cases. He deals with people, and there's so many people go to him on a consistent basis and just opening up to him, "What should I do? I need help." And it's a big problem. I don't know if we have 2 or 3 minutes. There's a list. I'm not going to go through all of them. There's this guy. His name is Michael Snyder. He's a Christian guy. He's the founder and publisher of Economic Collapse and the End of the American Dream. He wrote this book. It's very controversial, and he attacks his own his Christianity and a lot of the popes and what's going on with the Christians. He wrote a list of 100 facts about the moral collapse of America that are almost too crazy to believe. This is what he writes. Again, we don't have time, and certain things here I can't even mention in public. If you want, I could give you a copy of this. But just 2 more minutes of sharing with you some of the facts of what's going on in the world. Approximately 1/3 of the entire population of the U.S., 110 million people, currently have STD. You guys know what STD is? A sexually transmitted disease. Do you know what that it means? 1/3 of the American population? It's mind-boggling. It's crazy what's going on. Every single year, 20 million new STD cases in America. America has the highest STD infection in the entire entire world. Entire world is this country, the land of the free, that you're free to do whatever you want. It costs our nation approximately $16 billion a year to treat STD cases. The United States has the highest teen pregnancy rate in the entire industrialized world. An astounding 30% of all internet traffic now goes to bad websites. 30%. 30%. That means one out of three clicks that are pressed are going to inappropriate sites. And you're telling me that no, you don't need safeguards, you don't need boundaries. Our Torah teaches us that a person should never trust themselves. Whether you're a boy or a girl, doesn't matter. You remove yourself from sin. The hero is not someone who goes and passes the sin. It's someone who prevents themselves, takes themselves out of the potential sin. Has estimated 89% of all pornography is produced in the U.S. 89% of it all is produced in this land of ours. Marriage rates in the U.S. has fallen to an all-time low. Right now it's sitting at, I don't know what this means. I don't know how it makes sense. Right now it's sitting at yearly rate of 6.8 marriages per 1,000 people. It sounds crazy. The United States, more than half of all couples move in together before they get married. You know, the concept of marriage, these people move in together for a long time to see if it works out. And sure enough, they move in, they live together for a year or two, they figure that they know everything about each other, and now you're ready to get married. Once they get married, within a few months they get divorced. Well, what happened? I don't know, his mouth smells. Well, what happened the first 2 years you were living with him? You know, a person's living in sin. So you're living in sin, there's a Yetzer Hara. Once you get married, it's a different story. People get divorced. America has the highest divorce rate in the world by a good margin. The list goes on. This stuff is fascinating to me. Again, this is written by this Christian guy. America has the highest percentage of one-person households in the entire planet. Again, the concept of marriage is becoming a foreign thing. And it is a complete breakdown in this American society. Then he goes on to speak about abortions. You don't know about the number of abortions that are in the world. People rationalize, well, you know, they get pregnant and they have abortions. And the list goes on and on. So what are we supposed to take from here? The sota is what's going on in the world. You have to look at the world and all the horrible things that are going on, and you have to say this world is out of control. These people are nuts. And a person has to put the safeguards. Say, I want to go against the flow. The value of the Nazir is the fact he's able to go against the flow of society. Everyone's going this way. Everyone's living a life of passions and desires and living a life of completely being immersed in money and forgetting that there's a whole world to come. The person doesn't think about the world to come. This is my life. Get sucked into the money trap. And the whole life becomes increasing the bank account and being successful in the physical assets, and they forget all about the spiritual track. That one day a person is going to stand in front of Melech Melech in front of the King of all kings. And this is what the Torah means, that you should go against the tide. If a person is able to go against the trends, against society, against the norms of what the society preaches, and the fact that the society says this is what's in style, and you have to show off your body, and everything else that there is out there, this person is worthy to have the crown of God on their head. We're coming to the end of the world, in my opinion. I'm not telling you Mashiach's coming in the next month or two or 6 or year or two. I have no clue. It's not possible, in my opinion, that this world is going to continue for many more years to come, because it has hit rock bottom. In my opinion, it is completely hit rock bottom. And the people that are going to be on top in the next world, and when Mashiach comes, are the ones that the Nazirs in the world. The ones that are able to hold strong and not allow the Yetzer Hara and all the things that are sucking people in to be sucked in. Whether it's for money, whether it's for whatever things we mentioned tonight, everyone has their own challenges and areas that they need to work on. If a person is able to go against the tide and able to see the sota in her kukula, in her degraded state, and say, I'm going to stand strong, you're going to be standing in the winner's circle. This is what the real honor is going to be given in Olam Haba. When Mashiach comes, the cream of the crop are these people that are able to be Nazir, La Hashem, to have the crown of Hashem on their head.